everybody. Welcome to Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker, the former Comptroller General of the United States. Who's going to be joining us on a very important topic for the people in the United States of America and people around the world, and that is the government shutting down once again, which is becoming very annoying for anybody who watches this. By the way, in Europe, they're not talking about it at all. It's all they're talking about is the visits from the head of Venezuela to the head of Spain and Germany's recent election and France's recent election. That hits the news. Nothing about the United States being shut down, and of course, that's where it is from Europe. But we're joined by the Honorable David Walker, who's also on the road like I am, to tell us a little bit about the U.S. government no longer existing or shutting down. So, David, I have no idea where you're traveling from, but talk. What's going on with the government shutting down again for the umpteenth time?
I'm in the state of Connecticut, which we lived in for 9.5 years before moving back to Virginia in June of 2019. Look, what this relates to is the fact that Congress once again has not passed all of the appropriations bills necessary to fund the government for the next fiscal year. The government's fiscal year ends on September 30, so the new fiscal year starts on October 1. Shockingly, the only express enumerated annual responsibility that the Congress has under the Constitution of the United States to fund the government, the only one. And yet, the last time the Congress funded all of the appropriations bills was 1996 for the 1997 fiscal year. And during my lifetime, which is 72 years, the Congress has only done it on time 4 times. That's an F minus. Here's the deal. When you don't fund the appropriations bills, then that means that people can't spend the money. Now, there is a provision in the law that says if you're an essential employee, you continue to go to work, you just don't get paid. And historically, what's happened is, if you're an essential employee, you do go to work, you just don't get paid, but you'll get paid retroactively. If you're not an essential employee, then you don't go to work, you don't get paid, but historically they pay people retroactively. Another shocker is, guess who the only people who go to work and continue to get paid by the law, and that's the Congress of the United States, which are the people that cause the problem. That's why I'm cautiously optimistic that they're going to avoid a shutdown, if you will. They'll probably do some type of a continuing resolution that will fund the government at the same level as the prior year for several months, getting past the election, maybe when the new president is in office. That's my gut feeling as to what's going to end up happening. But what we need to do is we need to change the law to make it very clear that if you don't get it done on time, 2 things happen. There's an automatic continuing resolution at prior year's funding levels, reversing out any 1-year money. In other words, you can't continue over any 1-year money. It's just a baseline budget. And secondly, Congress must stay in session until they pass all the appropriations bills. They don't get paid until they pass all the relevant appropriations bills, and they don't get retroactive pay. It's called no budget, no pay, including no retroactive pay. Believe it or not, the very liberal state of California passed something like that. And guess what? They've been getting their budgets and appropriations bills on time ever since then. You've got to focus on the right incentives, transparency, and accountability mechanisms. We don't have that right now. It's essential that we move to it because this has gotten to be almost an annual event that we need to avoid.
It just doesn't sound very good. I mean, it sounds like you're incompetent.
I can't hear you, Nick.
Oh, you can't? Okay.
I can't hear you, Nick.
Let's bring in our panel. Kim.
Hey, Dave. Whoops. Good morning, David. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I can hear Nick just fine, so I don't know what the problem is there. Nick, you can go out.
Yeah,
Sounds like there is a
I-
problem with us today. We also have Sasha Starr and hey, Sharif. Good morning, Sharif from World Economics, and Dan Worthington and Rick Rosder. And I'm sure all of y'all have some interesting questions because anytime a government shuts down, it's irritating, and it happens with the U.S. all the time. And personally, I think we just need a whole new government system after traveling around the world and seeing how much better other places seem to operate. But David might have a different opinion than I do. But I have learned so much about other countries and how much better they are operating that I'm kind of fed up. I'm kind of like Nick. Maybe I should go somewhere else. All right, but who has questions for David? Where'd David go? There's David. All
There
right.
he is. Any questions on the government shutdown? In other words,
Questions, comments, concerns. Yeah,
questions?
here's the ultimate irony. Historically, when the government shuts down, the essential people work, the non-essential people don't, but everybody gets retroactive pay. So, in addition, it causes huge disruption with regard to government operations. You can't issue new contracts. There's just a number of things. It actually costs more money for the government to shut down than if it didn't shut down. And productivity is reduced.
But
I have a question, which for David, what are the odds, in your opinion, that we have a shutdown?
I think they're 25 days. I think they're likely to avoid a shutdown because we are in an election year. And I think they're going to want to try to avoid that because that's just going to be another issue that's going to end up upsetting voters. And, it's not just a presidential election that we have in November. It's also an election for the Senate and the House. The Republicans have a good chance of flipping the Senate. The House is very much up for grabs. It could go either way, just like the presidential race. I think it would probably hurt the Republicans in the House if they ended up shutting down, no matter what reason they might have. Even though they may have a good reason, it's still something that I think that would not be viewed with favor by voters. I'm not going to give you specific odds, Rick, but I think it's more likely than not that we won't shut down.
Thank you.
Down.
Why is it they are allowed? I mean, can we change the laws? Why, for some more accountability, but why is it they can shut down and either get retroactive pay or because they didn't do any work? I think we need to change the laws. No work, no money. They got free money, PPP loans, and then forgave them themselves, which should have been a conflict of interest to begin with. And that's millions and millions of dollars per pocketbook there. And now they don't want to work. Of course they don't. But I think that the law needs to change. You don't work, you don't get paid. You failed, you don't get paid.
Well, what I suggested,
work that way in our life. That's how we work.
What I suggested is that we need a change in the law that does several things. Number one, if you don't pass the appropriation bill on time, there's an automatic continuing resolution at prior year's funding, less any 1 year money. In other words, if a department or agency got money that was only good for 1 year for a specific purpose, it wasn't a recurring need, that gets reversed out, but you automatically get funding at the same prior year's level for recurring needs. Secondly, the Congress should stay in session until they pass all the appropriations bills. Thirdly, they don't get paid while they're in session. And number three, they don't get retroactive pay. And so therefore, you have a situation where government will not shut down, where Congress will have to stay in session. They'll have an incentive not to have this happen, and they'll be penalized if it does happen by having to stay in session and not getting retroactive pay. I think that would get the job done. I know it is overwhelmingly popular by the American voters. And who knows, we may have to do this as part of a fiscal responsibility amendment if Congress won't do it itself.
Yeah, David, we have some people around the world, and let's see if they have those same issues. Dr. Sharif Rana has joined us in from
And as I
Bangladesh.
said, California did this, and it worked.
Yeah, there you go.
Although they are far from fiscally responsible.
Right. Dr. Rana, do you have the same problem in Bangladesh? Does your country shut down because they can't?
You know, you have a similar situation when you're talking about the debt ceiling.
Yeah.
You know, we have a debt ceiling, and if we ever get up to the debt ceiling limit, then you have to shut down the government as well, because the government can't borrow anymore if we're running deficits, and we're running deficits of about $2 trillion a year. Right now, the debt ceiling has been suspended until early 2025. You know, we need to change that too. It's been a dismal failure. So we need to repeal the statutory debt ceiling and replace it with a constitutional debt to GDP limit, which is, all of you know, I've been fighting for. You know, there are several models we can use. The Swiss debt brake is another example. And the state of Colorado has something called the Tabor Amendment. You know, any of those approaches could potentially work, but the debt ceiling is a dismal failure. You know, we need something that will work, and we need something that will bind both current and future Congresses. And the only thing that will do that is a constitutional amendment.
Dave, sorry, when you said the debt ceiling's been suspended, what does that mean? Does that mean that they can borrow as much as they want?
I can hear him. So
I can't hear anybody.
Dave's having a problem hearing people.
But perhaps one of you guys can repeat my question to him. If the debt ceiling is suspended, does that mean they can borrow whatever they want? Is that what that means?
Can you repeat the question, Kim?
Kim, I can't hear.
Okay, say that again, Shaq, because I was having a hard time. Go ahead.
Dave said that the debt ceiling has been suspended. So a suspension of the debt ceiling, does that mean that at the moment the government can borrow as much as they want without limits?
Okay, David, if the debt ceiling is suspended, does that mean the government can borrow as much money as it wants? Oops.
We've lost him altogether.
There we go. He's completely.
Finally got the question out. But
welcome
home,
by the way, Kimberly. I hope you enjoyed your time in Europe. I think Sharif was going to make a comment before.
I've learned so much about their healthcare systems, about their economics, about their how they utilize alternative energy. I think they all do a marvelous job helping their people sustain. Albania probably was very curious to me because, you know, they are coming out of their Civil War situation, getting rid of the Communist Party that was there in 1999, and they're still growing. So walking with the people who actually lived during that time frame and talking with them was a lot. And I also got to see the Hollywood studios in Albania and North Africa. So that was pretty cool. But David.
Yes, I can hear you.
Question. Welcome
back.
Can
you hear me?
Right.
Yeah.
Shaq had a question. Welcome back. If they suspended the debt ceiling, does that mean that they can borrow any amount of money that they want?
Yes, they have written a blank check.
Oh my God! Oh my God!
And you know, and modify the debt ceiling, and they've done that before when they couldn't agree. I mean, the bad joke is that, you know, having a debt ceiling that's based in nominal dollars is ridiculous when you're running trillions of dollars of annual deficits. I mean, you know, it's not a matter of if you're going to hit it, it's a matter of when you're going to hit it. Plus, that's not the most important metric. As people know on this show, the three that I look at is debt as a percentage of the economy, spending as a percentage of the budget, and interest as a percentage of the budget. And all of those are flashing red and getting worse rapidly. And the frustration to me is neither one of the presidential candidates are talking about this. Both of them are making proposals that are fiscally irresponsible, and none of them are talking about how we're going to defuse the debt bomb.
No, I agree. And, you know, maybe that can be brought up if you're still having the debate that you had talked about doing, because I think these are conversations that need to be brought up to them. I don't know if they're going to be doing a debate again. There were so many rumors spinning around as I was traveling, and I finally just turned it off. for the last week so that I could just focus on, healing a little bit myself, because this can be just deteriorating as a U.S. citizen, and to be constantly getting questions about it and not even being able to answer, why are we in such a big mess when we're supposed to be the best country in the world?
As
So
of today, there's not another presidential debate among the two major candidates scheduled. Fox had offered to host a debate at a mutually convenient date, and Harris rejected that. CNN then offered to do a second presidential debate on October 23rd. They've already done one, and Trump rejected that. I'm scheduled to co-moderate a presidential debate of the second tier candidates on October 23rd in Los Angeles, California. Both Trump and Harris will be invited to that. Historically, they have accepted it. But, at least ours will be based on substance, I can assure you. And I can assure you that it will be fact-based, nonpartisan, and that if people don't answer the question, they will get a follow-up. Let me repeat my question.
So there is one more. In addition to your debate, there's the vice presidential debate in 8 days on October 1st. So we still have.
Great point, Rick. I'm looking forward to that. I think it ought to be very interesting. And I hope it is future focused and policy oriented, because, we need to focus on the future, and we need to focus on what needs to be done in order to help create a better future, rather than talking about personalities in the past.
You're likely
Also,
to be disappointed. The only time you get discussions like that is when you have more than one debate, and they divide the debates into subjects. This is going to be, another dance around the 90 minutes of who knows what.
Well, that's
if you guys could just keep the insects out of the debate this time round, because the main thing that everyone remembers about the last VP debate was that fly landing on Mike Pence's head towards the end of it.
And I'm
well,
sure
that's
there'll be a lot of
mentality of media versus what they think the viewers want to focus on. And I think the media is very good at manipulating the minds of the viewers and controlling them. And I think they've proven that, rather than trying to manipulate our minds to think about what's important, which is, how are we going to fix the debt of this country? And nobody wants, I grew up with, if you didn't have money in the bank account, you can't write a check. Or if you do, you're going to get fined for it. And I think maybe we need to start fining our Congress for not doing their job. They need to start getting their checks deducted, not free checks or shutting down. That's how I think this should work, personally.
But Kim, how many people have allowances? I've brought that up before, and how many people are, and I'd love to hear Dave's thoughts around this, are dealing with this notion of being able to operate with a blank check mentality? Because I know that we've been, and I think you even mentioned it, Dave, in a debt mentality for a number of decades, and through multiple presidents, both Republicans and Democrats. So I don't know that we'll ever get out of that mindset. I know that when Dave was in office, he was probably trying to get people out of that mindset because he was a comptroller general and everything. But what is your thoughts on that, Dave? Because it seems like we have this whole notion with that credit card mentality. I know it exists not just here, but even where Sharif is as well and everything. But what is your take on how we can globally get out of this credit card mentality and blank check kind of mentality?
Well, the federal government has become addicted to spending, deficits, and debt. They've lost control of the budget. Now 73% of direct spending is so-called mandatory spending, which means that we've written a blank check for it. It's you spend whatever you have to spend to pay for the things that have been promised by law. And the only way that you can change what you spend is by changing the law. Secondly, add tax preferences, deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions to the tax code. That's about $1.8 trillion a year. If you add that to the front door mandatory spending, which is 73% of the direct spending, you'll see that the Congress actually controls less than 15% of annual federal total spending. How can you call that a budget? If you're writing a blank, 85% of your expense actually limit 15% of your expenditures, you know you're going to get in trouble. In addition, if you have people who believe that you can borrow without limit, and you don't have an effective constraint on what you can borrow, what I would call a credit card limit, which is why I'm fighting for a constitutional amendment, then with short-term oriented politicians who basically don't want to make tough decisions and who think the bomb's not going to blow while they're in office, that's how you get where we are. So you need to make systemic changes in order to help create a better future, and that's what I'm fighting for.
The only group of people that spend money without any care,
People
or
have gone
want to
silent
spend
again.
money without any care for the consequences of where the money comes from, are children. And so perhaps we should all treat our politicians like the children that they are.
I'm going to go out and come back in because I can't hear.
Okay.
All right. It wasn't worth repeating.
I could always repeat it. But, I think that they should not be allowed to operate anymore. Just tell them you don't get the job done, you don't get paid. I bet you every one of them would start walking out the door, and we could start with a crew of people who would understand those terms. And maybe that's what we need to start doing. The people are the government. We are the government, and we're letting them act like they're kings and queens, being able to do whatever they want. They can not even show up and get paid, and that needs to stop. And you don't see this happening in other countries. The government, sometimes a little on the overzealous side, but they work too much. Like they're constantly looking out, I hope, for the best interest of the people. The prime minister in Albania impresses me the most. He's out there doing things to get the youth more involved, to inspire the youth. He is building more roads so that they can attract more tourism. And we need government like that. And you know what? I think our tax system is totally hosed. The top 6% tax cut literally cost us $2 trillion in tax revenue. We need to stop. We need to take a look at what we are cutting and what we're spending, cutting in revenue and what we are spending. Those are the two things. It always says is, how are we bleeding, and how do you patch that up? And then
Kimberly,
we spending.
Kimberly, I always find it so fascinating when Americans do this.
Save,
I always find it
spend, budget.
I always find it so fascinating when Americans do this. They're always complaining about how much it costs to not tax the rich more punitively than they're already being taxed. And then you go to Europe and you have a look at Europe and you have a look at how they tax. And Americans say, you know what, we'd really like to have the social services that Europe provides to its citizens. Now, a lot of people, especially conservative side of American politics, aren't going to want that sort of level of expenditure. But let's just say that you did want that. If that's what you want, tax yourselves like that. Tax yourselves like Europe does. You can't just keep beating up the rich all the time, and letting them keep their money isn't costing the government something. It's their money that you're trying to take.
Let's hear from Dr.
Sharif. If you tax everyone 10% across the board, then everyone's paying 10% of their money, just like tithing in church. If you understand tithing, you understand.
Right, but every time there's been any suggestion made on this show by myself or others that what you need to do is to flatten the tax rate and broaden the base, there's always opposition to it because, the rich. You take a country like Sweden. What does Sweden do? If you're at 1.5 times the average income, you're at the top tax bracket. Okay, it's not this ever increasing progressive tax rate. So the base is much broader. Now, I don't think that their personal income tax rates are reasonable. I think it's way too high, but that's besides the point. Most of the people that live in Sweden are fairly happy with the social services that they receive in return for the tax dollars that they pay. Now, I don't think that's going to fly in America. But again, you can't just sit there and go, oh, well, the rich need to pay for us to get more social services while we don't pay anything. That's not
I'm
fair.
just saying we need to take a look at the tax cuts system. If we're going to continue the tax system that we have, then we need to take a look at what the tax cuts actually cost us in revenue. And I think we just need to go to a flatter rate system and tax less for a while and see.
So
and
can I
if you're not doing tax cuts, then you're not.
So can I assume that Trump's waived then? Because Kamala Harris is just talking about increasing taxes. And that's her plan.
Hold on a second. Dave?
Yeah. If you look at the tax chapter of America in 2040, still a superpower question mark, you'll find out that 80+% of representative groups of voters supported a tax reform process that would result in much fewer deductions, exemptions, credits, and exclusions, a much flatter tax system, and one that where the 40+% of people pay nothing would have to pay something, and the wealthy would end up having to pay more. A fundamental difference between what we have right now. It would make it simpler, fairer, more competitive, more enforceable. In addition to that, as Shaquille mentioned before, the tax system in Europe is very different than the United States. For one thing, a lot of their revenues come from a consumption tax. It's called a VAT. Okay. So we do need comprehensive tax reform. The primary problem that we have is excessive spending, but we're going to need more revenues as a percentage of GDP. And to do that, the best way to do it is through comprehensive tax reform along the lines of what's outlined in the book.
Can we listen to Dr. Sharif to see what his opinion is from Asia? You're up.
Yeah,
Dr.
thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nick, to give me the opportunity. Actually, last few months, I was in Stanford University in California. I work with Product Realization Lab with Dr. Edelman. And I have some interesting experience from USA, especially from Stanford University. I got involved with NASA, with Google's and Apple's, with San Jose State University, then in Canada with University of British Columbia. This is very interesting. All of the big things actually happening in California. I want to give special thanks to all of the American people, those who actually restructure and rebuild and go for innovations and a lot of scientific effort. But one thing I have in mind, like I saw a lot of homeless people in California, a lot. I'm very honest with you. I visit around the world. I was in Singapore. I never see these things. I was in Dubai. I never see these things. I'm very honest with you, even if bigger than Dhaka city. So this is one of my biggest concern. Like maybe your governments should rethink about your people, should rethink about the communities and everything. And I discuss with many homeless peoples and everyone. Like Silicon Valley is a richest people city, right? All of the rich people, economically, you are 14 times bigger than Bangladesh. And I'm really worried like about the equity distributions and everything. So what is the solutions? We always can do the criticize and everything. You know, like last few years, I working for talent economy, and my objective to uplift 100 million people from emerging economy. And I am very happy when I go to US, I get a lot of people support. Someone give me car, someone give me a house, someone help me to engage with Stanford, someone help me to engage with, this is American beauty. And you believe in open society. And one of the interesting things happened in Bangladesh, you know, last few years, a few months actually, we have some interesting things in Bangladesh. I do not want to say it's interesting, better, like you, I just want to share, like you, one young man, he actually lose hand, right? You see this, he don't have his hand. So it's happening in Bangladesh. He's young, right? Very young, a young person. And I just want to share my audience, my young people what I say, my 100 million youth. Can you share with me this?
Yeah, it depends if you can put it up, we can share it. But let's ask David about this problem. We brought this on several of our shows. David, do any of the Kim, if you could ask David about the homeless situation in the United States, why isn't that part of the debate?
Can you give me just 1 minute? I just want to share one of the interesting stories from Bangladesh.
Sure.
Like, the young people, I'm actually fighting for the youth community. I said that talent economy. In emerging economy, we have many talents. We need smart people like you who can uplift this community. So these young communities, they actually go against corruption. Last 15 years, we don't have democracy. We don't have any voting system. We have a lot of corruptions, all of the negative things happenings. And the young people, they come out and they bring actually all of their force, and our prime minister ran away. And then they don't took the power. Few of them actually join in the government, and they invite all of the smart people like you, like Dr. Mohammad Yunus, he win Nobel Prize, and right now he is our chief advisors, and all of the talented people and honest people, and they invite in Bangladesh, and now they are running the new government. So this can be a good model, good example. Even social media have a lot of propaganda, but it can be a very good model. Now India following Bangladesh, Pakistan following Bangladesh, Malaysia following Bangladesh, even where there is a corruptions and everything. So things is that you have to understand the youth community. You have to give opportunity to the youth. Definitely the experienced peoples and everyone, they will take the lead, but youth has new perceptions. That is the things I just want to share, that trust on your youth, give them enough opportunities, even in the politics. I'm very honest with you, I am not impressed by the debate, because I'm from debating communities. I attend in the Oxford IB, in Cambridge IB, in Harvard, everywhere. So I'm not, because when I was young, I actually learned my debating skill from uh, Clinton, from that debate. But now, honestly speaking, I am not impressed by how I see Kamala Harris or Trump debate. It's not actually intellectual discussion. It's more like a blaming each other.
I
So I
agree.
believe America has very good culture. You have many good people. You have a very young people, very good intellectual community. But why you don't invite all of your talent people like Bangladesh in your politics? And they will restructure or rebuild your politics. Even Bangladesh is very small. I told you, even compared to California, Bangladesh is very small. But what our youth did, they go against corruption. It can be a very good example for everyone. So restructure the politics, invite all of the talent people, and focus on talent economy. It will be a very good solution for everyone.
Let me jump in. First, you started with homelessness. Homelessness is a problem. It's a bigger problem in California. A disproportionate share of homeless people either have mental challenges and or dependency challenges. In addition to that, it's exacerbated in California because California is a sanctuary state, which means they attract illegal immigrants, and California ends up providing significant aid to illegal immigrants, makes them a magnet for more illegal immigrants to come there. And so, plus California has a beautiful climate, so people want to go there. You can stay outdoors most of the year, if you will. So it is a challenge, but it's a multifaceted challenge. And one of the big aspects of it has to do with border security and immigration policy, as well as the mentally challenged, if you will. As far as our young people can be part of the solution, but historically our young people have not been as actively engaged in our political system as other segments of the population. They typically don't vote with the same preponderance as people in other age groups in particular. And that needs to change. But the last thing I would say is, one of the things that we need in order to revitalize our democracy, in order to have a republic that's truly representative of and responsive to the public, because that's not what we have right now, is a number of political reforms. And there's a chapter in the new book that talks about political reforms that received well over 80% support from representative groups of voters of all different backgrounds. And that's something that we need to pursue as well, because we have a dysfunctional democracy. We have a republic that's not representative of nor responsive to the general public.
I have a question for
Hey,
Dr.
Dave. Go
I have a
ahead.
question for Dr. Sharif. So Bangladesh is located right between South Asia and East Asia. And are y'all going to eat our lunch? Are you guys going to outcompete us in the next couple decades? Or are we all going to prosper together? What do you think?
Right now, we have a lot of challenges, definitely, because the new government come. It's a combination of youth and experienced people. But how I see the global community, even right now, Bangladesh is a very good ally. Like USA is a very good ally for Bangladesh. So many good company, large company like Singapore, they are coming to Bangladesh. Dr. Mohammad Yunus is a very dynamic. He's highly connected, very dynamic, and he's inviting all of the things. It takes maybe next 6 months, we have to observe what's going on. But honestly speaking, I'm very much positive about the youth contributions, the young people contribution. It's actually a very good asset country like Bangladesh. The same thing, India has youth community. Pakistan has the youth communities. Malaysia has, China has, or the Asia Pacific has. So things is that political reformations. So only thing is that we have to remove corruption from our country. So we are trying to do so, but this is dangerous that last 15 years, only from one Islamic bank's previous government hacked around $10 billion. So it's very small country, like, so $10 billion hacked by one political party. It's very, very bad things. But that is also opportunity. I think this is a very big opportunity for Bangladesh to reform our economy, reform our politics, reform our culture. So maybe this next 1 year is very crucial for us. And I want to invite you all to join our World Talent Economic Forum. Maybe you have better technology to help Bangladesh. Maybe you have better knowledge to help our youth. Maybe you have better ethical institutions who can teach our youth communities, or any good things. I saw many good things in USA. USA has a lot of good things. You have world best research center. You have world best education institutions. Everything we can work and we can help each other and we can grow. So I think that is the way that emerging economy and developed nations can help each other.
Can I jump in? Talk about corruption.
Thank you.
Yeah, go jump in, David.
Yeah, you talk about corruption, Doctor. There is some corruption in the United States, but not nearly as much as there are in other countries around the world. But we have a bigger problem. We don't have a plan of what we're trying to accomplish and how to measure success at the federal government level. We have a lot of inefficiency and, quite frankly, incompetence in that we end up spending a lot of money, giving a lot of tax preferences without understanding what are we trying to accomplish, how do we measure success, how do you link resources to results, because in many cases we're spending money or giving preferences that aren't generating a positive return, and without some type of a plan and without some type of outcome-based metrics like key national indicators, which I've been advocating for a number of years. Without that, you don't know how well you're doing, whether you're getting better or worse, and how you compare to others. And therefore, if somebody says we got a problem, we're not getting results, then all you do is you throw more money at it. But in fact, you could be throwing good money after bad. Same thing happens with regard to the regulatory process. Okay, what are we trying to accomplish? How do you measure success? And so this is something that clearly is very fundamental. I mean, it's like management 101. And yet our federal government has not embraced it yet. And
Hey,
we've been around for almost 250 years. You may not want to run into it. You may not want to rush into it, but I would argue after almost 250 years, it's done.
How would we
So,
establish
so
the
you talked about the Swiss break. Sorry, you talked about the Swiss debt break earlier. I'm just curious. I know that your system doesn't allow for it at the moment, but Switzerland's very interesting because they have a much more direct democracy
That's
type
correct.
of arrangement, and so people basically have like referendums. And you know, people often ask me about the lump sum taxation because, as you guys know, I'm involved in Switzerland, and actually places like I absolutely love and adore Zurich. I just really love the city. But if you live in Zurich, you can't have lump sum taxation because the canton there doesn't allow it, so you'd have to live elsewhere. But do you think that it could be possible for the United States to have, you know, like referendum style things where people can actually vote on individual issues in a similar way to what they do in Switzerland? Because I actually haven't seen that in any other country. I'm sure it does happen, but I haven't actually seen it in any other country but Switzerland.
It exists at the state in a number of states in the United States, initiative and referendum, including in California as an example, including in Florida, but it doesn't exist at the federal level. The closest thing that we have is there are two modes of ratification of a constitutional amendment. One mode is you have state legislatures to vote on it. 3/4 of the states have to agree to the proposed amendment in order for it to become part of the Constitution. The second mode is similar to a referendum, but it has to be presented. It's a convention of delegates in each state that are pledged to vote for or against the proposed amendment. So, and that's the approach that we're trying to pursue.
But that's still an indirect system, right? So people have to rely on their elected representatives instead of them actually being able to vote on the individual issue
That's
separately.
correct. They can't put it on the ballot, which is the initiative part, right? So
Do you think it would be possible to do that at the federal level? Is there something that could be changed to, you know, Republican voters who might want healthcare, or Democrat voters who want lower taxes, for example? Is that something that could be directly given to people to vote on in any way?
you'd have to change the Constitution. And you'd have to change the Constitution. That would be a fundamental change because our founders envisioned a republic as a representative democracy, not a direct democracy. In many cases, what you're talking about is a direct democracy. It's where the people decide what issue they want to vote on. They vote on it. And that's it. You cut out the intermediary. You cut out the elected representatives. I don't see that happening here. I do, however, believe that we need reform, some along the lines that we've talked about before, in order to revitalize our republic.
Hey, David, along those same lines and everything, how can we get into, I know it's a common political term, and I know that definitely as a comptroller general, you dealt with this term, but how can we get more into accountability and more into less duplication? Because I can tell you, I'm just going to give an example that there's some American Rescue Plan money that is going to the artists, and I know for a fact that there are two agencies that are running that money and everything, and one of them is giving more of a payout, which means that they're going to want a lot of government regulations and know what your tax records are and everything else, where the other one will be given more of a stipend and it'll be less regulated. But even those two organizations, and I'm just using them as an example, will admit that there is severe duplication going on, and that's just a kind of a surface view of that particular program. But I'm just wondering, how can we get rid of some of this get more accountability and get rid of some of the duplication in government?
Well, several things. One, the Government Accountability Office, which I headed for about years, does an annual duplication overlap report that was originally required by law when Dr. Tom Coburn, who may God soul, was a former senator from Oklahoma. This was an issue he had a keen interest in. He got a law passed in Congress, which requires GA to do this every year. So that's duplication, overlap, and redundant. GAO also does, in cooperation with the Inspector General's improper payments report every year, which is for fraud, waste, abuse, and mismanagement, if you will. And so those are good things to do to provide more transparency. But I come back to what I started with before. When you're passing a tax law, when you're creating a new program, when you're providing additional funding, one of the things that you ought to be required to do at the outset, you ought to be required to say, what are we trying to accomplish and how do we measure success on an outcome basis? And that needs to be a key part of the annual appropriation process, the ongoing oversight process, the periodic reauthorization process. That is a fundamental change that is sorely needed. In addition, you may have heard that one of the presidential candidates has talked about creating a government efficiency commission, and we've got a prominent entrepreneur who has expressed potentially being part of that. That's similar to a concept that I proposed 10 or 15 years ago. A government transformation commission would take a look at what is the federal government doing, to what extent is it appropriate to be done at the federal level versus the lower level, to what extent do we have duplication, overlap, redundancy, which there's a lot of it in government, and to be able to make a package of recommendations for consideration by the Congress and the president that would devolve some things back to the state, eliminate some, consolidate some things, cut some things, but to a much more comprehensive review that, quite frankly, is not being done right now. Right now, government is, once a program or policy exists, it's there for eternity unless something big happens that causes changes to be made.
Well, David, just curious because you mentioned something about measuring the government success. How can we put together key point indicators to establish those thresholds of what's important? We got to set some priorities, but where would you begin with key point indicators for measuring the government success? Because we're going to have to do something, because if we don't, they're just going to keep, renegating this whole system out of, we're not going to have anything left for our youth. There's not going to be, why should they even pay attention at this point? There's nothing left for them. So what can we do to do that?
When I was Comptroller General, I advocated that we create a strategic plan for the consolidated federal government, coupled with key national indicators that were outcome-based indicators, to be able to say, what are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure success? How are we doing as compared to plan? Are we getting better or worse? And very importantly, how we compare to others. I also gave speeches to this, including with the OECD. Several OECD countries have adopted that concept. The United States has not yet. It needs to adopt it. From an intellectual standpoint, it's something that ought to be done by an entity within the Office of Management and Budget, which is the only government-wide agency. It's also affiliated with the White House directly as part of the White House complex. They should lead the planning and performance effort, and GAO ought to be involved to be able to periodically review and evaluate what they're doing. That information ought to be used by the Congress for authorization, for appropriations, and for oversight. That would fundamentally change how government operates. It would give us a much better ability to separate the wheat from the chaff between what's working and what's not working, so that we can end up rebaselining government, because it's grown too big, promised too much, subsidized too many, lost control of the budget, undercut states' rights, and is on an imprudent and unsustainable path. So we don't need nip and tuck. We need radical reconstructive surgery, and we need it sooner rather than later.
You could add to that. It's undermined individual rights as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you.
See, to me, I find this so. It just for me, obviously, the five countries, two of which I'm a citizen of, three of which I've lived in. It worries me because we seem to be going down a path of more debt, of more unsustainable plans, and there is going to be growth in the developing world, which is fantastic for them. But I am worried that we're going to fall behind, and we can eventually start losing our talent. And I think I'm an example of that. 27, 28 years old, couldn't get license to do what I want to do in Australia, went to Switzerland. And I was headhunted to Switzerland. And although there were actually cheaper countries as far as taxes are concerned in Europe for me to live, I went over there because it gave me opportunities that I didn't have in Australia. I don't think that Australia is better off for that. I really don't. I don't think that Canada or the United States, although they do tax people overseas, but I don't think that they're better off when they see young people get really frustrated with the direction of the country and say, I'm not going to hang around because I may not be able to change the world, but I can change my world. And so I'm going to go somewhere else where the opportunities are. And that's very, very damaging.
I know Toby, I think he's got his hand up. Let me just mention one thing. When you talk about direction of the country, by a 2-to-1 margin, Americans believe the country is headed in the wrong direction by a 2-to-1 margin. And that poll was last week, so it's up to date.
That's amazing. Joe Toby.
In terms of I know you had mentioned, that one candidate had put out the idea of a government efficiency thing.
Yeah.
However, I personally disagree with it because we could actually do the same thing, couldn't we, by making the government oversight committee nonpartisan, similar to like the CBO and all the other stuff that isn't headed by someone in the House who is partisan to one, because we can admit it. We right now are so divided tribally. We're not even able to discuss things a lot, even on our differences, because we want the echo chamber. We want to hear that we're right, regardless of whatever that side may be. And I think if we take the government oversight committee, move that to a nonpartisan entity, and make it that way, wouldn't that create the similar situation that you're asking for, Dave, by basically having a group to look over government to make sure that we are not just wasting money here or wasting money there, or expending different places that we should, rather than creating a whole new entity that is already there.
Well, first, by definition, the best that Congress can be is bipartisan. They'll never be nonpartisan. Okay. Secondly, the closest thing that we have in the U.S. government right now to a nonpartisan oversight entity is the GAO. I was the only political appointee in GAO. And today the only political appointee in GAO is the current Comptroller General, Dean Dodaro, who was my number 2 when I was Comptroller General. So that's the closest thing you get to a nonpartisan entity, and its job is to work for the Congress to help oversee the executive branch, to improve the performance and assure the accountability of the government for the benefit of the American people. There's really several dimensions to the problem. The first thing is you got to have a plan. You have to have a point who's responsible for developing that. You have to have performance metrics, okay? If you don't have a plan, if you don't have a point, if you don't have a performance metrics, all you have is prayer. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm for prayer, but I'm for prayer, plan, point, and performance metrics, okay? So the first thing you have to do, in order to have the oversight, you got to know what you're overseeing. And part of the issue is, what are we doing? What are we trying to accomplish? How do we measure success? Are we being successful or not? Without those elements, you can't have an effective oversight mechanism, whether it be by GAO, whether it be by the Congress, who is charged with that responsibility. And keep in mind that Congress is the only body that actually can authorize the expenditure of funds, declare a war, and certain other things that are exclusively, given to it under Article 1 of the Constitution. So I hear you, but Congress, saying that Congress can be nonpartisan is, as some would say, an oxymoron.
Dave, just a quick couple of questions for what you've proposed there, though. We know that in your politics and in the politics of my countries, because we're very similar, the politicians don't have a plan that extends past the next election generally. So is it actually possible? But the second question, which I think is actually a more important question for you, when you say that there has to be performance metrics, what would happen if those performance metrics are not met satisfactorily?
All right.
Because unfortunately, what we've seen in the past is they just get more money.
No, you're putting your finger on a key point. All right. Management 101 says that you ought to have performance metrics, right? And do you have? I don't know of any company that doesn't have performance metrics. All right, in order to make resource allocation decisions and other key management decisions. But one of the biggest reasons why we haven't had performance metrics, in my view, at the federal level, although let me be very clear, we do at GAO, and they made a big difference because our results increased multiple fold once we ended up taking this approach. Start focusing on outcomes, start focusing on results, which is what the whole government needs to do. What we did is transferable and scalable throughout government. But one of the primary reasons you don't have performance metrics, in my view, Shaquille, is because the politicians don't want them. They don't want to be held accountable for results.
Thank you.
Because if the people saw what kind of results they were getting for what is being done, they would be appalled.
Well, I think those of us, especially people that come on to your show and watch this show, we do shine a light on it, and it is appalling. That's why I'm so against paying taxes in the first place. Governments need to have revenue, but I don't want you taking half of my money so you can, wither it away on silly things. Jatobi?
Dave, it sounds like you have a similar view to me, that a government should, instead of being run like a business on this side where it's for profit, it sounds like you're more like me, who thinks that a business should be run more like a nonprofit, because nonprofits, you have to have a lot of accountability and you have to show metrics for every single thing if you want to keep your money.
Well, the difference is nonprofits go out of business if they can't end up generating revenues to cover their expenses, and that's not the case for government. Well, I know we're at the hour now.
Yeah, nonprofits go out of business and we go off the air. So we'll see everybody next week on Economics with the Honorable David M. Walker. Take care. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.